ahead and get started. We're about I work with security guests, and we're talking about the dangers of third-party content. It's really creatively named title. We're talking about every type of third-party content that you're going to put on your application. So third-party content is anything on your site that you didn't create. And today we're specifically talking about active content. And we're going to focus in on JavaScript because the risks are a little more better understood with that type of HTML, CSS, other types of things like that can also cause risk. But we only have, well, at this point really about half an hour, so we're going to try to run just through the JavaScript types of examples. The point here is that a lot of different sites are including various third-party content on their web pages. And this can be actually a really bad thing if users or the application owners themselves get a misconception about the trust boundaries of that application. So let me show you what I mean. That web application queries a database and returns data. Within the components of that application that we control, the server, the database, so on and so forth, we have what I'm calling a circle of trust, which is a really cheesy name that just means everything that we control that has access to that user's data. So we control all the components, all the servers that have access to this data, and we can draw a clear boundary around it. We know where that trust boundary is. And we don't trust anything else to attack us. We don't trust them basically not to do anything. And this is kind of the standard web model that most people have come to accept. And this is what your users expect. When they visit your website, lots of people today have talked about trust. This is what they're talking about. The user that comes to your website expects that you will protect this boundary and prevent other outside parties from getting to that user's data. This is what we have these days. As websites start including content from other sites, as they start adding content from users, websites rely on users to provide active content to their sites. They're pulling it in from other sites. We get this amorphous blob where no one's really sure where the trust boundary is. Because if I'm including content from this content provider, maybe they're pulling it in from somewhere else, and it just gets into this kind of almost like a web of trust that nobody really understands the boundaries. And our user here is still expecting the old model. His data. He's expecting us to know where that trust boundary lies, and we don't. Really what we have to worry about in this case is not just users attacking each other or trying to get into our data, but we have to worry about the trustworthiness of these systems. We have to worry about the users that are connecting to this system over here, because now all of a sudden these users who never even touch our system can access our users' data over here. And users can obviously attack each other because they're uploading trusted content. So if you're an expert, three questions you can ask when you come across a situation where you're either including third-party content on your own sites or when you're visiting a web page that might include other people's content. So who is allowed to put content on the page? It can be users, it can be other sites, it can be whoever. And what could be accomplished if that content were malicious? Well, if it's JavaScript, quite a lot. But we're going to talk about some limiting factors that might reduce what actually could be accomplished and what you can do about that. And then can you prevent unexpected changes? Can the content just change out from underneath your feet? And if you're running scripts or external content that's hosted on other servers, you probably can't prevent any changes, and we're going to talk about the risks associated with that too. But the goal here in asking these questions is to reduce these factors as much as possible. You want to get as much control over the content that you're including from other sites and from your users as possible. So I'm going to go through some examples. There's two main categories that I've seen where sites accept user content and actually active content. The first is just customization. So Blogger might allow you to run JavaScript or something like that. MySpace allows you to customize your homepage. The goal of all of this is so that users can make their homepages as ugly as they want them to be. The second scenario are user-provided features. And this is where users are actually creating the functionality of the site themselves. And we're going to go through an example of this, but they use JavaScript, they use Flash, sometimes they use an API to actually create little mini apps that provide the entire functionality of the site. And this is the business model of several major applications like Google Gadgets or Facebook or places like that. So I want to talk through some examples and actually give you some, sort of evaluate the security model of these various sites. So I'm going to talk about iGoogle. as an example for this user-provided content scenario. How many people brief rundown. When you visit this page, it's designed to be used as your homepage. In fact, there's a little bar up there that asks you if you want to make it your homepage if it's not. And all of these little apps here, one provides the time, one provides the weather, are provided by the user community. Some of them are provided by Google, some by other companies. Most are just provided by some Yahoo on the internet. You have no idea who it is. And so, who knows what is being uploaded in these apps? You as a user really have no idea because they've all been uploaded by just the user community. So, fortunately, they have an approval process that is supposed to sort of weed out bad applets or sorry, it's not an applet, little gadgets. So here's the approval process. I create a gadget and I put it on my server. And it's really just a file that I upload that sort of tells Google how to run. I submit the gadget to Google. There's a process to do that. Is the gadget approved? Google has some approval process. I don't even know what they do. Maybe that their process is trying to weed out bad gadgets, prevent attacks against their users and things like that. So let's say they approve my gadget. It's uploaded to the Google servers on the gmodules.com domain. It's a separate domain designed for these gadgets. It's displayed in the content directory, so users can click a button and it lists all the different content that they can download. And it's loadable on users' homepages with one click. So if I go to the content directory, I click, I want to add this, and it shows up on my homepage. All sorts of horrible, nasty things to you, and they didn't approve it. Hooray for them. So if it's not approved, here's what happens. It's still uploaded to the Google servers. It's displayed somewhere else. They won't load it in the content directory, but I can advertise it on my own website. They even provide me a button that says add to Google that I can display on my website. And it takes 2 clicks instead of 1 to load it onto a user's website. So this approval process doesn't probably protect users very well. So here's kind of an overview of their security model. Whether my gadget's approved or not, it fetches it from my server and uploads it to this separate host, gmodules.com. And this gmodules.com domain is designed to protect Google users from all of the potentially malicious content that people are uploading in these gadgets. So it's loaded, the way that gadgets are loaded onto a homepage is through an iframe. The site, if you look at that main page, all of those little gadgets are loaded through an iframe to this separate domain. And because it's on a separate domain, Google argues that you can't access any sensitive data from the google.com domain. So basically there's a ton of unvalidated, user-created, active content, like JavaScript and what have you, on gmodules.com, which is owned by Google, and theoretically that's not dangerous. People have touched on this. Arsenic actually contacted Google and blogged about it, reported it as a cross-site scripting issue. They responded that because it's on a separate domain, it's okay. So let's evaluate that claim for a minute. Can JavaScript inside an iframe still hurt you? Okay. JavaScript in an iframe on a separate domain. It can't access the document object model or cookies or what have you. It can't directly get information from your Google users. And by the way, this stuff is dangerous for a whole lot of other reasons. I'm going to focus on why it's dangerous specifically to the users of this iGoogle page. Because what I'm really looking at is what type of risk you're introducing into your own apps when you allow this sort of behavior. So it can't access information directly, but it can redirect the other frame. So I could try to phish your users or do other things like that. It could attempt to download malware. All of the different types of attacks that people have been talking about all day are usually done with JavaScript. Google modules are running from the same domain, so I might be able to attack other modules. And in Google's case, and this is a really important point, I'm doing all of this from a domain you probably trust. If you use, how many people use NoScript, the Firefox plugin? Okay. Essentially what it is a plugin for Firefox that prevents scripts from running unless you specifically allow them. It's a way to browse the internet with a little more security because I'm not going to just automatically I can browse the internet with some assurance that I'm protected from these types of attacks. The problem is, if I use Google as my homepage, I probably have enabled the gmodules.com domain because I want my other gadgets to run. I need to run JavaScript on that domain. So things like NoScript, other types of domain blacklists and things like that won't work in this scenario because it's coming from a trusted domain. And so think about this for a minute. That might browse to this page while they're at work, and maybe they have financial data on their computers, or maybe they have, what have you. At any rate, they're coming from inside your corporate network. What are you going to do? Blacklist Google? I mean, there's not a lot you can do as an organization to prevent this type of scenario. And users, this is a really popular site. Users often use this as their homepage, which means they're going to load it every time they start a browser. If you search for this string right here, you can actually find it. I wouldn't recommend going to that actual page, but this JavaScript file will download all of these different types of viruses and trojans. I think actually the number that it downloads now is doubled. It's up to like 66. But this is one attack. And by the way, this can be run from inside that iframe because it's attacking the browser directly. It's trying to download malware and things like that. With just a malicious JavaScript file. So it turns out that Google went one step further. Now, it turns out that not all gadgets actually run in an iframe. It's not required for their security model. They provide a function called inlining, which removes the iframe completely and places the gadget directly on the page. Now all of a sudden, all of that cross-domain protection is gone. I can access cookies, I can access the document object model, I can do whatever I want. This is, in effect, a cross-site scripting attack. That's basically what this is. But don't worry, because the user is protected with this message, and if you can read that in the back, you get bonus points. But basically they say, this module requires inlining. This is a really evil script. If I load this on your page, or if you accept my invitation to load this on your page, it'll get this warning before it actually displays the content. And it says, this could give its authors access to information, including your Google cookies.
Name of the gadget.
Yeah, that's the name of the gadget, sorry. This is the gadget that I obviously created that requires inlining, and it's not very nice. Assuming it wasn't called Really Evil Script, it's called Really Cool Whack-A-Mole Game. And I'm a normal user. I'm probably going to click OK there. My Google cookies and preference settings, I don't even know what that means. It doesn't sound that bad. The point is, the only thing preventing the user from complete ownage that I do run it. This is just, again, the script is really not that evil, but it sends your cookies offsite, it steals your session, so on and so forth. But now that I'm running scripts on Google.com in this scenario, what can I get? Well, okay, I can attack your gadgets, I can do all of those types of things, but Google has a lot of my data. They've designed their entire business model around being one-stop shopping for all of my information. They have spreadsheets, they have my calendar. They're designing their entire site around including all of this information, and they have essentially a single sign-on operation between all of these different functions. And so once I get into one, I'm into all of it. So if I run this widget or gadget on your page, I get everything that you've got. And there's actually another feature that they have that I just love, Google Checkout. Now, as a caveat, I don't actually know if the Google Checkout service itself, like this is just a sign-up page, which is on, I could attack this page, but I don't know if the service runs on the same domain. I'm not going to enter my credit card number in there, so if you'd like to be my guest, let me know what happens.
They're still not marking them HTTP only, are they? Right? The
What's
cookies?
that?
Google doesn't mark their cookies HTTP only yet, right?
I don't believe so. I'd have to go check. JavaScript's immensely powerful, and I don't care if you use HTTP only or not. I could set up a JavaScript-based proxy. I could do all manner of other attacks, and so really, I would be extremely wary of any site that just tries to rely on HTTP only to protect their users from this type of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think they do. So obviously, there's a lot of potential problems there. So if we go back to that factors of control that I talked about earlier, who's allowed to put content on the page? Basically everybody. It's a user community. Anybody can upload content. There's an approval process, but it doesn't really work. And so the point here is that there's no good way to measure the trustworthiness of the users who are submitting the content. I have no idea whether one gadget is more likely to be safe than another. This is exactly what they were talking about in the eBay presentation earlier, where they have a rating system for their users. That's an attempt to do exactly this. They have a rating system, but it's really just how cool the gadget is. There's nothing to do with how safe it is. And then again, all domain-based trust mechanisms are gone. So, and again, all of your data. If it's within the iframe, it can't directly access that information, but it could attack your computer. And the interesting thing about this is even though they upload all of my gadgets to their own domain, it's really just for performance reasons. They don't actually check for updates. I mean, they'll periodically check my site for updates. And so if I upload a perfectly valid game or gadget or and I wait until it gets popular, say it has 2,000 users, then all of a sudden I turn on a silent attack that steals everyone's data, it will automatically get uploaded to gmodules.com, and then we'll start attacking users maybe the next day or something.
I was thinking just that. What prevents you from the script source from pulling in other script source for a remote location and you just swap it out?
Nothing.
I mean, you don't have to have like the back door or whatever in the code at the time.
Right. And you don't have to have the backdoor in the code at the time, but you can update it whenever you want. And that's actually the point. That's the whole reason for this third point here, because they have no control over changes. So even if their approval process were perfect, and if they prevented unapproved scripts or unapproved gadgets from getting on the page, they'd still be in trouble because they can't control changes. And this is probably the most common problem with third-party content.
How is the polling process done? Is that SSL even?
Oh, I have no idea. When I started testing this, I just got hits to my server every couple days. Polling for the site. Just because I loaded it on one page, they just start querying my server looking for those scripts. So Google's querying my server like 20 times a day now, looking for these old files that don't even exist anymore.
Well, are you running SSL on your website then?
Actually, no, not on that part. So no.
So there's the answer.
That's a good point. That third-party attack vector would also apply to like Apple widgets as well.
Yep.
Third-party content.
This, by the way, I'm not trying to pick on Google. Everybody does this wrong. It's completely prevalent across basically the entire internet. And I have some examples at the end if I have time for them. So specific problems, if we kind of look at what we would recommend them change, security warnings alone are just about useless. Users aren't going to click delete instead of OK. They're just not. I'm sorry. That single sign-on between all the different services allows me access to all of their data. So in addition to just attacking the user through trying to download malware, they have no barrier between sensitive content and untrusted third-party content. And so, for example, I don't have to log in again to get to my email. I don't have to do anything. I don't know about Google Checkout, but I don't have to issue any other credentials. So a cross-site scripting attack or some type of malicious gadget could access all of that information. And then they allow gadgets more power than they need. They could restrict the functionality of this, but instead they allow me to use free-form JavaScript, which can do anything I want. But they don't need all of that functionality, so they could limit that as well. So what we're shooting for is really a scenario that you're going to run into on your own site. I'm trying to get off this slide fast because that's annoying. But there's advertising and ad tracking. There's site tracking. You know, you had one visitor a day. You went here, and then there's sort of everything else. I'm going to focus on the first two because they're a little easier to understand. But there are tons and tons and tons of scenarios out there. I have maybe 5 minutes left, so I can't talk about them all. But
Well, you got 10 plus we can take a break if you want.
okay, great. Banner ads are often rotated with JavaScript. So every user doesn't get the same ad. They basically generate a random number. I know you can't read that, but essentially this is an example of one of the scripts. It generates a random number and includes a remote JavaScript sending that number off-site to get a random remote image so that you get different ads when you visit the page each time. This is just basically how they all work. They don't even necessarily need to work this way. And by the way, I have no idea why someone does document. So this is basically how they all work. They pretty much all load a remote script. This one's from DoubleClick. And they pretty much all just kind of send some random number. So they include some kind of JavaScript on the page that then calls a remote script.
It's the only way to get the random number into the URL. That's why they're writing it.
Yeah, they don't actually have to include a remote script, though. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. So, question. How do you hack 2,000 websites at once? Remote script is being loaded on 2,000 servers. And that's just a number that I pulled out of their marketing material. They have 2,000 sites as their customers. But replacing that JavaScript file all of a sudden will attack every single website that loads that script because it's loading a remote script. and it's running on all of their pages. So you have access to all of their users' data. It's running in line, and you're saying maybe you trust them. Yeah.
Why hack it when you can buy it?
That would work too. Yeah, well, and that's the point. Maybe they have a disgruntled developer. Maybe their owner just decides he's going to get rich and move to Tahiti. Maybe somebody hacks it. In fact, I have a reference at the end where somebody actually did was able to inject code onto DoubleClick servers. I don't know if it's that server, but point is, how can you afford to assume that they're secure or that they're not going to attack you? Why on earth are you letting someone else run scripts on your site? So let's talk about, I'm going to pick on Google again. I really don't think that they're worse than anybody else, but they're an easy target. So let's talk about site tracking real quick. Google Analytics, we used to use it, and then I started doing the presentation, we stopped. But how many people use like the site tracking thing on their sites? Okay. But these are the actual instructions for Google Analytics. I just pasted it in from the web page. They want you to copy and paste this code segment into your page, into every single page in your application. And it loads a remote script, this urchin.js file. And it sends it some other information when it loads it. Okay, another pop quiz. What do you call a script that runs on every page of your application, is hosted on someone else's server, and sends data off-site? Is it an attack snapping into production by a disgruntled developer, or Google Analytics?
All of the above.
Right, exactly.
Answer is D.
Yeah. So obviously there's some problems here. They require you, this is their instructions. They require you to embed a script that runs on every page, that runs in the context of your domain, has access to all of your user data, is externally hosted so you can't control changes, and is protected by a security program that, again, you have no control. Really just decided to go nuts and steal all your data. You have no idea what they're doing. And so again, if we go back into our factors of control, I'm starting to get annoyed with that word, but anyway, who's allowed to put content on your page? Now this is a company, so theoretically you trust them a little more than users, right? But have you even done your due diligence to talk to this company about what they're doing? Do you ask questions about their security program? For your advertisers, does a good job, I have no idea. But we used to use them, we didn't ask them any questions, we just stuck it on our webpage. Do you demand independent validation? Now, as a caveat, I work for a company that does independent validation. But that doesn't mean that there's not a risk in just calling them up and saying, hi, are you secure? Yes, great, thank you. You want somebody else to look at that and make sure that they're actually telling the truth. And then work this into your agreements with these providers. In fact, there is this book that they've handed out to you, there's a contract at the back. That it's just a basis, but it sort of forms a foundation for working security concepts into these types of agreements. Now, you may not be able to forge an agreement with Google that they protect their data. I don't know how much pull you're really going to have for using a free service, but your advertising company, you could. Or some of these other companies that you're allowing to put these types of scripts on your site. If you really have to make it work that way, then you better build in some requirements that they have to protect your data and to limit your liability in case they do get hacked. So what could it accomplish? Again, it requires inline scripts for just about everything, and there's no real way to prevent that. But could you prevent unexpected changes? And if you've ever been a part of a production development team, would you ever allow anyone to upload anything to the production web server without checking it first? Without going through some kind of QA process, validating whether or not it's some kind of back door? If so, you should probably stop doing that. And this is what an externally hosted script is. You're adding functionality to the page that you don't control and can change at any time. And again, hosting the script will prevent this. So you could download and host the urchin.js file yourself. You could stick it on your server, and you could read it, and if you have the time to do that and the expertise, right, you could actually theoretically prevent them from doing this. The problem is, first of all, updates are problematic. So if they update their script, they're expecting it to be hosted on their site. And if they update their script, they may update the server-side functionality as well, and all of a sudden your site tracking is broken. But furthermore, this actually gets really difficult. And there's an example later on that demonstrates this, but validating this code is sometimes extremely hard. Other times it might be easy. If they're just generating a random number and sending it off-site for advertising, you might be able to check that. but some of these other cases are actually really difficult. So here's a simple formula. If you're using external JavaScript, the security of your users there's nothing you can do to actually protect your users beyond the security of that file, because once it gets compromised, your users are going to download it, the ones not using NoScript, are going to go download it, and they're going to run it, and it's going to steal all of your data. And this is the point that I want to make. The users are expecting a security model, or a trust model really, where you control everything that has access to their data. That's what they expect. And that's not what they're getting when you start loading this stuff on your page. And so they talked a lot about user trust and how important that is. If this actually happened, where somebody attacked your site through this third-party provider, do you really think that your users are going to blame the third-party provider, or do you think they're just going to leave your site? And that's the question. Or do you think they're going to sue the third-party provider instead of you? So it could this obviously could violate your own privacy policies. You're effectively allowing someone else to. I don't know if this is true, but could the use of these third-party scripts violate regulatory requirements like PCI or other privacy guidelines or whatever? If anyone, by the way, in here is a governmental auditor or something like that, come see me afterwards because I really have a valid question about this. But these requirements, they all include the implementation of safeguards to protect the exposure of this data. And they include regular assessment, neither of which you can guarantee that that third-party provider is doing. And really, they are a third party, so this first requirement is broken already. And I've never known anyone to actually be audited for this. So let me put a caveat in there. I've never actually seen it happen, but I'm not sure that, I guess I should say yet. I have no reason to think that this won't happen in the future, especially if there's a well-publicized incident in which, say, a lot of banks got caught. There's just a lot of risk out there through these third-party companies, and it's a big, juicy target for attackers. This has got to have a big bullseye painted all over it. If I'm a hacker trying to get as much information as possible, I'm not going to hack your bank. I'm going to have to double-click. So I put up some examples. I just basically typed in a bunch of URLs and looked at what they have on their site. I have no internal information on these places, and they're not our customers, so please don't sue me. I'm just going to walk through a couple of examples to kind of show you this really is a widespread problem. So I went to BestBuy.com. They have an embedded script from ChannelIntelligence.com. I have no idea what that does. This is just the front page of Best Buy. Amazon.com. If you want to buy your hot dog costume, you're going to have to go past these iframes from DoubleClick and Advertising.com. This is kind of interesting. It has another embedded script, and if you actually read this script, and I know you can't read it in the back, it says, do not copy or host this file yourself. It's dynamically generated. And that's another point, by the way. A lot of these aren't static files. The JavaScript actually refers to like an ASP page or something like that dynamically generates the JavaScript, giving you no ability to download it. And you should not need to change it. The providers, advertisers, site trackers, whoever, make it really, really difficult for you to protect yourself from this type of attack, just because they want the convenience and ability to run updates of hosting that file themselves. Okay, Bank of America. This is actually my bank, so I can say that I looked at them with I don't know, I'm a customer, so I guess it makes it okay. This is their search page, and this is a tag that I love. They have an embedded script, which to me looks like an external script that's been downloaded and hosted. So bravo. If you look at the script, and you're not going to be able to read this in back, I'm sorry. This is actually what the script looks like. Now, tell me, raise your hand if you can tell me what that does. 50 points if it's from the back, because I don't even think you can read it. This is either obfuscated or somebody has a really weird coding style. It's just really difficult to tell. And this is why, if you're actually trying to download and host these yourself, the validation process on this is ridiculous. How am I supposed to tell what that does? I'm an expert. This part, and I don't know if that's any easier to read, it basically just loads an external script. That's all it does. So essentially, you've got this big complicated thing that doesn't really help you at all to download it, because it's just going to run an external script. And I don't know why a provider, like I said, they make it really difficult, would obfuscate obfuscate the stuff that they're sending you so that you have no chance to read it and actually tell whether or not it's safe. But that's exactly what they're doing.
It appears they're also doing some cookie manipulation in the middle of that, because they're doing some
Yeah.
splits and some unescapes, and they're writing to your cookies, and then they're
Yeah.
actually at the very bottom line doing an object.document.write of a script tag.
Well,
while
yeah, that's
they're-
actually that script is writing that URL up there. So yeah, it's
Let's compress that obfuscated.
Yeah, it's basically
well, it's got
like
variable
poor man's
names that look
compression.
like your variable name is _o dot q. I don't know. Maybe it's not obfuscated. It's just ugly. Either way, the point is I can't read that. So, the Schwab.com login page. This is on the login page. And again, I'm not trying to say that these sites are any worse than anybody else and just went to a bunch of random sites. And this one's my favorite. This is the Ringo.com login page. That's a lot of trust.
Vector.
Thanks for
Yeah.
playing.
Yeah, exactly. There's some Flash in here, there's an iframe, there's a bunch of scripts. It's just crazy. So just to kind of
But it looks really
wrap
good.
this up really quick, if you ask these 3 questions, every time that you are faced with loading this content on your site, and by the way, this happens a lot more often than I think a lot of people think. We have a client that's a bank, and they got a request in an email just from their advertiser saying, hey, can you please load this script on every single page in your site? And they force a lot that you get these requests. So who's allowed to put it on your page? Can you reduce that, or can you increase the trustworthiness of those people? And if you're accepting it from users, probably not, but could you maybe only accept it from certain users? Somehow come up with some kind of trust model for your users so that they can actually measure how trustworthy this different content is. And for your content providers, can you incorporate agreements with them that require them to validation and things like that? And then what can be accomplished if we're malicious? Could you reduce that? Can you segment the untrusted data from your sensitive user data by either putting it on a different domain? So like my Bank of America search page, maybe they move that to search.bankofamerica.com. And it's still dangerous, and it still could create liability, but at least I can't just go start sending myself money if I attack you. Actually affect, but you're probably going to have to go back to whoever it is that's providing the script and argue with them for a while about whether or not you should be able to do this. So if that happens, feel free to give me a call. I'll argue with them for you. But this is probably the hardest part because everyone designs the way that their sites work to prevent you from hosting it yourself. And that's essentially it. I have some resources and things like that, things you can do with various types of content. There's some stuff in there with CSS that I didn't get to, and then just some other things like that. So, are there any questions about anything? Yeah.
That JavaScript that downloads a bunch of malware,
Mm-hmm.
how does that work?
Um,
I mean, is that like way backdoor hack kind of thing, or is that stuff that everybody's supposed to be able to do in JavaScript?
Theoretically, you should be able to run JavaScript without actually enabling it to download executables and run them on your machine. But every week, probably, there's another vulnerability that comes out that enables some other attack that enables something like this. So the problem is, it's just really hard to depend on that. Theoretically, yeah, it's fine, but browsers nowadays have so many different plugins and
Right.
so much functionality that if there's a vulnerability in any part of that, you could run into this type of problem.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay. Thanks a lot.